Chag Sameach. Who can believe a year later that we are back on Zoom for Pesach? This is not the way that we would have chosen to celebrate the Festival of Freedom. And yet here we are. And thanks to the gift and miracle of technology, we are able to create Seders that are lively and that can connect us across the country and across the world. You will find here video clips from the rabbis, student rabbis, and friends and families of the South African Union of Progressive Judaism across South Africa, joined together to support all of our families to celebrate Pesach this year and in years to come. May it be a good, may it be a liberating and a sweet festival of Pesach for us all. You are welcome to use just some of the clips, which you will find individually on YouTube, and intersperse them into your Seder, or you can just press play and watch the whole lot, pausing when you need to. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. I was asked to tell you a little bit more about the symbolic foods that we have on our Seder plate. And the content of the Seder plate can be very different by different traditions, different countries, but most of them contain a shake bone, lettuce, an egg, greens, a bitter herb, and charoset, a sweet mixture of fruits, nuts, and spices. Doesn't look good, but tastes delicious. These symbolic foods should be placed near the leader of the Seder, and during the course of the Seder, they are pointed out and explained. So on my Seder plate here, we do not have actually a shank bone as raw, but we have different bits because we are vegetarians, and it would still represent the sacrifice that were done in ancient days. The roasted egg, here we go, roasted egg, represents the Passover offering of ancient days, as well as the wholeness and continuation of cycle of life. Bitter herbs, our maror is here, and it will be horseradish or romaine lettuce usually. Here is our beautiful maror. And it's a reminder of the bitter lives that our fathers and mothers had back in Egypt. The charoset, this mixture of apples and all the yummy things that one could think about, wine and nuts and dates, represent the bricks that Hebrew slaves had to use when they were building for the Pharaoh. The greens, our karpas, represents spring that is now happening in the land of Israel. And of course, we will also have a water with salt that we will be dipping our food in it in order to remember the bitterness and tears and sweat of the Hebrew slaves back in ancient days. A few seconds ago, I explained to you about the traditional symbols of Passover, but also there are a few new extensions to our Seder plate. And the first one might be familiar to you, as it is a very famous orange that was originated by Susanna Heschel. And orange represents our need to be inclusive of all who feel marginalized within the Jewish community. And I think it's something that we need to think about in our day, especially now that we're all in lockdown. Are we really inclusive, even in our virtual world? And the second addition that we added to our Seder plate are those olives. So why olives would be the final item on our Seder plate? Because after the flood, Noah's dove brought back an olive branch, and it was a sign that the earth is flourishing again. And today, ancient olive trees are destroyed by violence all over the world, and they're making a very powerful symbol of peace. And we keep an olive on our Seder plate because this is our prayer for peace in the Middle East, in every place where what destroys lives, hopes, freedom of people, that we are celebrating tonight. Chag Sameach.
Okay, everybody, repeat after me. Kadesh Urchatz,
Kadesh Orchatz,
Karpas Yachatz,
Karpas Yachatz,
Magid Rachza,
Magid Rachza,
Motzi Matzah,
Motzi Matzah,
Maror Korech,
Maror Korech,
Shulchan Orech,
Shulchan Orach,
Zafun Barech,
Zafun Barach,
Halel Nirza.
Hallel Nirza.
And that's the Seder order.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik neo shel Yom Tov. Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'romamanu mikol lashon v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu ba'ahava moadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason את יום חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת, מכל העמים ומועדי קודשך בשמחה ובששון, הנחתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש ישראל, והזמנים.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
And so we reach the second part of the Seder service, Urchatz. This is where we wash, but without a blessing. What other time in life do we wash without a blessing? Every time we leave a cemetery, we wash our hands with water, but we don't say a blessing. What's the connection? Well, Pesach is about freedom. Leaving the cemetery is leaving a place of death to a place of life. the living. Slavery is like death, and so we wash our hands now in the urchatz, removing from ourselves the impurification of slavery, which is like death. For this, you'll need a cloth, you'll need a jug of water and a bowl, and you're going to go round your table pouring the water over the hands of each person seated around the table and hand them the cloth to dry their hands, and no blessing.
Why do we dip our food in salt water 2 times on this night? The first time, the salty taste reminds us of the tears we cried when we were slaves. Parsley and celery are symbols of all kinds of spring greenery. The second time, the salt water and the green can help us to remember the ocean and green plants and the earth, from which we get the water and air and food that enable us to live. Nevarech et pri ha'adamah. Let us bless the fruit of the earth.
So we've reached the 4th part of the Seder, which is the Yachatz. And what you're going to do now is you're going to uncover the 3 matzahs that you have in the middle of your table. So the top matzah we're going to save for later on when we do the blessing over the matzah before the meal. And the bottom matzah we're going to use when we make the Hillel sandwich, which is coming later too. But right now we're going to focus on that middle matzah. So take out that middle matzah, and that is going to have 2 parts to it. The smaller half in a moment we will keep and we'll use later on when we do the blessing over matzah before we eat. But the bigger part is really important because that is going to become the afikoman. And that is what we can't continue the Seder after our meal until we've eaten the afikoman. And many of you will have different rituals of hiding the afikoman. So right now I want you to lift up that middle matzah and ask everybody around your table to be very quiet so you can hear as you break that middle matzah. So you're going to hold it up, you're going to break that middle matzah, and you're going to put the smaller half back in between those 3 matzot, back in the middle, and the bigger half you're going to keep wrapped up and hidden for the afikoman.
Halachma, halachma anya, biachalu, achalu yahatana, bera, bera, demitzrayim, bera, bera, demitzrayim, kol dikfin yetem veyechud, kol ditzrich yetem veytzah, hashata, לשנה הבאה בארץ ישראל, השתה עבדי, לשנה הבאה בני ובנות חורים, הלחמה anya, biachalu, achalu machatana, bera, bera, demitzrayim, bera, bera, demitzrayim.
מה נשתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, חמץ ומצה. הלילה הזה כולו מצה, הלילה הזה כולו מצה, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים 7 ירקות, 7 ירקות. הלילה הזה מרור, מרור, הלילה הזה מרור, מרור. שבכל הלילות אין אנו מגבילים אפילו פעם אחת, אפילו פעם אחת. הלילה הזה שתי פעמים, הלילה הזה שתי פעמים. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים ונושבינו בין מסובים, ונושבינו בין מסובים. הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים, הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים.
Chag Sameach. You've just heard the Arba Kashiot, the 4 questions beautifully chanted. The 4 questions is an opening for the telling of the story of Pesach, of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt. The 4 questions are not directly answered in the Haggadah, but they are asked to teach us an important lesson, that as Jews we should always critically analyze and question our sacred texts and our traditions. By questioning and analyzing, we gain knowledge and come closer to God. The 4 questions, as I mentioned, are not directly answered, but I'm going to answer them tonight. So, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot? What makes this night different from all the other nights? On all other nights, we eat chametz and matzah. We eat leaven and unleavened. On this night, kulo matzah. On this night, only matzah. Why do we not eat chametz, not only on this night, but on the whole week of Pesach, during the whole week of Pesach? Well, we are told in the Torah that we should not eat chametz during the 7 days of Pesach, and we shall not own any chametz during the 7 days of Pesach. We are meant to rid ourselves, our homes, of all chametz. The reason given by the Torah is that when the Israelites had to flee Egypt after the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn Egyptian, they had to flee in a hurry before Pharaoh once more changed his mind. And so they took the dough that they had prepared to make bread, put it in kneading bowls, and carried it out into freedom, not allowing the dough to rest and to prove to rise, as is normally done when making bread. And so when they eventually could bake the bread came out hard and flat, like a matzah. And therefore, to remember our ancestors' hurried exodus from Egypt, we are not to eat chametz. Chametz also symbolizes arrogance and wrongdoing, and we are meant to be free of arrogance, wrongdoing, and all the phobias that we have during Pesach. We are meant to free ourselves, so we rid ourselves of all the chametz, all the baggage that we carry, to start afresh, to start anew. The second question, on all other nights, we eat all types of herbs or vegetables, but on this night, only maror, only bitter herbs. The reason why we only eat bitter herbs at the Seder table is to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. The third question asks that on all other nights, we only dip once, but on this night, we dip twice. So in ancient times, and many of us still today, will eat finger food, maybe as a starter, as an hors d'oeuvre, and you dip it in sauces. But on the Seder night, you make sure to dip twice during the meal. The first time is when you take the karpas, the vegetable, the potato, or the parsley, and dip it in salt water. The salt water reminds us of the salty tears that the Israelites cried, and they cried to God, and God heard their plight, heard their plea for freedom, and sent Moshe Rabbeinu to free us from Egypt. The second time we dip is when you eat the maror. So there's a custom to take the horseradish or the bitter lettuce and to dip it in a bit of charoset, the apple and date and wine mixture with a bit of honey that is made to symbolize the mortar, to symbolize the clay which the Israelites used to make bricks in order to build the fortified cities for Pharaoh when they were slaves. And so we dip our bitter lettuce or our horseradish root in some of the charoset before eating it. And the fourth question asks that on all other nights, we eat either sitting upright or leaning at the table.
But on this night, we eat leaning. And the reason for leaning at the table, at the Seder table when we eat, is to emulate the ancient Roman nobility who used to lie back on couches when they ate at their banquets. The Seder was formulated by the rabbis to replace their ancient Passover offering, the Paschal lamb, the Pesach. When the ancient Israelites would take a lamb or a kid, a baby goat, per household, per family, make pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they slaughter the lamb or the kid and roast it over a spit braai, and eat it with matzah and maror, with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. When the temple was destroyed, this sacrifice could no longer take place. And so the rabbis formulated the Seder to replace this sacrifice. And the Seder was formulated during the time of Roman persecution of the Jews in the land of Israel. So as a snub, as a slight to the persecutor, the rabbis formulated our celebration modeled on the ancient Roman banquet. That's why we eat leaning at the table. That is why there's a tradition that when we pour our 4 cups of wine, we don't pour our cups, the wine for ourselves, we pour it for somebody else, and somebody else pours the wine for us, to acknowledge the fact that as free people, we have others pour the wine for us. And now we can continue with the story of the Passover, of the Pesach, of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus from Egypt, with Avadim Hayinu.
There are many other contemporary questions that we can ask at our Seders. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we are not obligated to ask the questions of what separates us from redemption, but tonight we are so obligated. Here are some examples of contemporary questions we may want to ask and try to answer. Why are women not universally recognized as being created in the divine image? Why are Israelis and Palestinians still at war with one another? Why are millions of people still suffering from hunger? Why are there still dictators who prevent the voices of their people from being heard? Like the traditional 4 questions, these are just examples. But unlike the traditional questions, these are problems whose resolutions resist easy answers. We are not obligated to complete the task, but neither are we free to remain complicit. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor velo ata ben chorin lechivatel mimena. What questions would you add to this list? What questions do we need to ask and answer before all can truly be free?
Once our ancestors were slaves, but with miracles and marvels, we were able to walk out, to leave slavery in Egypt. And today, thank God, we are free. Avadim hayinu, once we were slaves, ata v'nei chorin, and now we are free people. Avadim hayinu, hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin, ata v'nei chorin, v'nei chorin.
Every year at the Seder, we are invited to bring our child selves with us. Children are infinitely curious. They ask questions about everything they see, their thoughts, their experiences. They just want to understand the world around them. And our rabbis have always told us throughout the generations that no matter what you do at the Seder, your first responsibility is just to ask questions. And our Haggadah gives us a wonderful model of 4 children who can teach us what it means to ask questions at the Seder.
The first child that we meet at our Seder is the wise child.
The Chacham.
The wise child feels very connected. The wise child understands the traditions. The wise child is able to participate fully in the Seder and in asking questions. The second child is the challenging child. The challenging child often gets frustrated because the challenging child doesn't really get things. Although they understand the stories and the lessons and the rituals, they just don't quite connect and feel that they're personal. So they get frustrated, and it comes out in challenging questions and annoying behavior. The third child is the simple child. The simple child is calm, and he just wants to understand more. The simple child, she has that curiosity that Brett described earlier of just wanting to understand the world more. And the fourth child is the one who does not know how to ask questions. The one who feels so overwhelmed by the magnitude of the world that they don't know how or what to ask.
So now that we have our 4 friends here, what we want to invite everybody to do at this year's Seder is to recognize which child are you bringing to the table and when. When do you feel excited because you totally understand what's happening? Let's say it's the plagues or even the story of leaving Egypt. Let's say it's opening up the door for Elijah. The parts of the Seder that you're really excited about and would love to teach the table. When are you the wise child? When are you the child who doesn't connect to parts of the Seder? When do you feel like maybe you're getting frustrated or angry? This is taking too long. You want to start eating already. Why is that person still telling that story? When are you getting frustrated? And when is the difficult child coming out for you?
And when are you curious to know a little bit more? When do you meet a part of the Seder that doesn't quite fulfill everything that you thought you understand and you want to know more? When do those curious questions come out? And when at the Seder do you feel so overwhelmed that you don't know what questions to ask or how to ask them? And how can you turn to your friends and your family at the Seder and ask them for help so that we can all continue to ask questions
together?
The Passover story in 10 scenes. 1. Long ago in Egypt, a mean ruler named Pharaoh makes the Jewish people slaves. They are forced to do hard work, building cities and pyramids. 2. Pharaoh orders all baby boys born to Jewish families to be taken away. But Moses' family floats baby Moses in a basket on the river. Moses' sister Miriam watches over him when Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby and brings him to the palace to be raised. 3. The Jewish people don't like being slaves at all. They are hungry, tired, and have no control over their lives. They cry out to God for help. 4. Moses, all grown up, goes out from the palace and sees an Egyptian treating a Jewish slave badly. He stops the Egyptian. Now Moses feels that he too is Jewish and runs away from Egypt. 5. Moses is herding sheep when he notices a strange bush. It's on fire, but not burning down. Amazing! He hears God's voice telling him to go to Pharaoh and demand that the Jewish people, Moses' people, be set free. 6. With his brother Aaron, Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go." Pharaoh answers, "Never." 7. God brings terrible plagues on the Egyptians. Water turns to blood. Frogs, wild animals, and locusts are everywhere. People and animals get sick. Hailstones fall from the sky. Everything turns dark. After each plague, Pharaoh agrees to let the Jews go free, but then he changes his mind. Finally, after the 10th plague, Pharaoh frees the Jews. 8. The time has come. With great excitement and nervousness, the Jews pack their things and rush out of Egypt. They go so fast that the bread they are baking in celebration doesn't have time to rise. 9. The Jews think they're safe, but when they reach the Big Sea, they hear Pharaoh's army chasing after them. Pharaoh has changed his mind again. The Jews are trapped, but then a miracle happens. The sea opens up so the Jewish people can march across between two giant walls of water. 10. The sea closes up. The Jewish people are free. They sing and dance and celebrate. At Passover every year, we remember the miracle of freedom.
והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, והיא שעמדה לאמותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם, שהקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם.
This is Go Down Moses. When Israel was in Egypt's land,
let my people go.
Oppressed so hard they could not stand,
let my people go.
Go down, Moses.
Way down in Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Okay, so for the 10 plagues, we take a drop of wine out of our cup and put it onto our plate. We're lessening our own enjoyment in remembrance of the suffering that the Egyptians felt during the time of the 10 plagues. And as we take a drop of our wine for each plague, we chant them in the Hebrew and in the English. Dam,
blood,
Spardeya,
frogs,
Kinim,
lice,
Arov,
beasts,
Dever,
cattle disease,
Shechin,
boils,
Barad,
hail,
Arbe,
locusts,
Choshech,
darkness,
Makat Bechorot,
slaying of the firstborn.
And just remember not to lick your fingers afterwards. Don't enjoy the plagues.
One morning when Pharaoh awoke in his bed, there were frogs in his bed and frogs on his head, frogs on his nose and frogs on his toes. Frogs here, frogs there. Frogs were jumping everywhere.
We've just chanted and spilt wine for the 10 plagues listed in the Haggadah, the 10 plagues that afflicted the ancient Egyptians. We live in a very different world, but Pesach is a good time to remember that even after our liberation from slavery millennia ago, there are still many challenges for us to meet. Here are 10 modern plagues. Number 1, inequity. Access to affordable housing, quality healthcare, nutritious food, good schools, and higher education is far from equal. The disparity between rich and poor is growing, and opportunities for upward mobility are limited. Number 2, entitlement. Too many people consider themselves entitled to material comfort, economic security, and other privileges of middle-class life without hard work. Number 3, fear. Fear of the other produces and reinforces xenophobia, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and transphobia. Number 4, greed. Profits are a higher priority than the safety of workers or the health of the environment. The top few percent of the world's population controls the majority of the countries of the world's financial health. Our corporations send jobs offshore, and workers around the world's right to organize and bargain collectively is threatened. Number 5, distraction. In this age of constant connectedness, we are easily distracted by the unending barrage of information, much of it meaningless, with no way to discern what is important. The 6th plague is that of distortion of reality. The media constructs and society accepts unrealistic expectations, leading to eating disorders and an unhealthy obsession with appearance for both men and women. And social media is often guilty of sensationalism and of the spread of false information. The next plague is that of unawareness. It is easy to be unaware of the consequences our consumer choices have for the environment and for workers at home and abroad. Do we know where or how our clothes are made? Where or how our food is produced? Working conditions, the impact on the environment. The 8th plague is discrimination. While we celebrate our liberation from bondage in Egypt, too many people still suffer from discrimination. Here in South Africa, racism is still rife, and around the world, people of color are more likely to be imprisoned than people that are not of color. Women earn far less than men for doing the same jobs. And this is even evident in many Jewish communal organizations. The 9th plague is the plague of silence. We do not talk about things that are disturbing, such as rape, sex trafficking, child abuse, domestic violence, and elder abuse, even though they happen every day in our own communities. The 10th and final plague is a feeling of being overwhelmed and disempowered. When faced with these modern plagues, how often do we doubt or question our own ability to make a difference? How often do we feel paralyzed because we do not know what to do to bring about change?
A Prayer in a Time of Plague by Rabbi Martin Cohen. Avinu Malkeinu, dear God in heaven, protect our families, our friends, and our neighbors as we negotiate these troubled seas in which we find ourselves afloat. Ever mindful of the fact that we are your creatures, we turn to you for guidance and for strength as we pray that the public officials charged with bringing us through this crisis will be granted wisdom, intelligence, and insight born of compassion and charity. We pray, too, that the physicians, nurses, and hospital employees who are on the front lines be spared all distress and disease as they care for the stricken, for the elderly, and for the infirm. Most of all, we pray that you look with kindness and generosity on us all, and particularly on those already infected, for whose recovery we this day ardently pray, as it is written in your holy Torah, for I, the Almighty, am the source of your healing. Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may such be your will.
This is Dayenu. Ilu hotzi hotzianu hotzianu mi mitzrayim hotzianu mi mitzrayim Dayenu Day Dayenu Day Dayenu Day Dayenu 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 Day Dayenu Day Dayenu
Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. The element of the Pesach, Matzah, Maror appears in the Haggadah toward the end of the Magid. Magid as in the part when we are reciting the writing of the Master Sages. This part, the Pesach, Matzah, Maror, is interesting because it belonged to someone who was not in that original banquet of Seder, of Pesach Seder, at the house of Rabbi Akiva with Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yoshua, and so on that have gathered in Bnei Brak. Rabbi Gamliel was the patriarch of his time, the head of the nation, and he was in Yavne, succeeding Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And what's interesting to see that while the other rabbis are giving very rich content of how many miracles had happened here and how many miracles happened there, and so on, very rich kind of description of the miracle of Pesach, Rabbi Gamliel is kind of reducing it to the minimum of what is the minimum requirement, and this is Pesach, Matzah, Maror. He says, if you haven't recited those three elements, you haven't fulfilled your duties, which means that what is the basic requirement to fulfill one's obligation for Pesach in a situation where there's no temple? So one is the Pesach, it is remembering the Paschal lamb, which is symbolizes on the Seder plate as a shake bone, or in many cases the chicken wing. This is the zroa. The second one is the matzah, the unleavened bread, which is presented on the Seder plate as well. And the third is the maror, the bitterness that our ancestors have been through in the Egyptian bondage. which is represented by the chrein, by the horseradish, and so on. So while the Haggadah is very rich and full of details, this saying of Rabbi Gamliel is kind of reducing it to the minimum elements of what it is to fulfill one obligation for Pesach. Pesach, matzah, maror.
A cup to our teachers, to those we have known and those whose work has inspired us and made space for our lives. We are grateful to you who did and said things for the first time, who claimed and reclaimed our traditions, who forged new tools. Thank you to the teachers around us of all ages, the people we encounter every day who live out their values in small and simple ways, and who are our most regular and loving reminders of the world that we are creating together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. We can drink the second glass of wine. As we now transition from the formal telling of the Passover story to the celebratory meal, we once again wash our hands to prepare ourselves. In Judaism, a good meal together with friends and family is itself a sacred act, so we prepare for it just as we prepared for our holiday ritual. After you've poured the water over your hands, you can recite this short blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim.
We're about to eat our Seder meal at last. But before we do so, we have to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah. As mentioned, we have to eat matzah, and we cannot eat chametz. We cannot eat bread with yeast or cakes. But matzah is bread, defined according to the definition of halakha. It is made of one of the 5 grains, either wheat, barley, oats, spelt, or rye, mixed with water and a bit of salt, and then baked. The secret of making matzah is that from the time that the flour and liquid are mixed until it comes out of the oven fully cooked, has to be no longer than 18 minutes. A minute longer and it's considered to be chametz and cannot be eaten on Pesach. So because it is bread and we eat it instead of the fluffy bread that we used to, instead of the challah which we eat during other festivals and Shabbat, we say the hamotzi. So we lift up our matzah and we say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Before we can eat our matzah, we have to say a bracha for the mitzvah of eating matzah. Matzah symbolizes the bread of affliction, lachma anya, which we recited earlier. And this is a bread of affliction. May all who are hungry come and eat. So the matzah, the flat hard bread, was the bread that the poor of Egypt ate, that the slaves ate, while the rich enjoyed light, fluffy yeast bread. At the same time that this matzah is also the bread of freedom, because we remember how our ancestors rushed out of Egypt carrying the dough with them, and when they baked it, having it not allowed it to prove, it came out hard and flat. So it teaches us that there's a fine line between slavery and freedom. Often when we are free, we are enslaved to other ideals, to our inhibitions, to our xenophobias, to other phobias. And we're also not free of fear of doubt. So we say the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. You break a piece off. Enjoy. The other item of food that we have to eat at the Seder is maror, bitter herbs, lettuce. Some people use horseradish. I have a plate here with lettuce and with horseradish sauce. So I couldn't find any horseradish root. And this lettuce reminds us of the bitterness of slavery. So you can either use romaine lettuce, bitter romaine lettuce, or chicory, a bit of horseradish, not too much, or other bitter herbs. And I'm going to dip my lettuce in some horseradish sauce and say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu achilat maror.
And now the final step, before we can finally eat our Seder meal, the final step is called korech, which is a sandwich, a Hillel sandwich.
What's a Hillel sandwich?
A Hillel sandwich was named after the great sage Hillel, who lived in the time of the temple, and tradition teaches us that Hillel used to eat his paschal sacrifice with matzah and with the bitter herbs. And so in memory of that, today we eat a sandwich with bitter herbs and matzah.
Yes, so we are here to teach you how to make the Hillel sandwich. And because, of course, we are filming this the day before Pesach, we have a sort of like a deconstructed version of the sandwich to show you, but we think you'll get the point. So, first thing, we will need 2 pieces of matzah. So, first piece of matzah. And second piece of matzah. And now Sophia already explained that what goes in between these 2 pieces of matzah, maror, the bitter herb, or what we like to call it, chrein. So you take the chrein, you spread it over the first piece of matzah, you put the second piece of matzah over it, and you take a big, juicy bite. But now, yes, Sophia?
But there is a tradition that has evolved of blending the chrein with charoset. So in our charoset, we have got apples, apricots, and almonds. And of course, it should have some kind of texture that looks a little bit like clay. And all together, we put the sweet charoset and the bitter chrein in between 2 pieces of matzah.
The second piece to complete the sandwich. And all this together is the Hillel sandwich.
And as we eat the bitter and the sweet together, we are reminded of the bitter and the sweet in our own lives, and that we cannot know one unless we know the other.
But Teavon, yay, we can eat! Now it's time to go look for the Afikomen.
So we raise the 3rd cup of wine and we bless Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals. Shir Amalot B'shuv Adonai Et Shivat Zion Ayinu Kachomim Az Yemales Chok Binu Ushonenu Rina Az Yomru Vagoyim Higdil Adonai Lasot Imele Higdil Adonai Lasot Imanu Yinu Samechim Shuva Adonai Et Shavitenu Kafikim Banegev Hazorim Badima Barina Yiktoru Haloch Yelechu Vacho Nose Meshech Hazara Boyavo Yavo Varina No Se Alumotav Chavarai V'chavrotai Nevarech Yehi Shem Adonai Mevrachmeta V'yad Olam Yehi Shem Adonai Mevrachmeta V'yad Olam B'shut Chavarai V'chavrotai Nevarech Shalchanu Mishelo Baruch Shalchanu Mishelo V'devo Chayinu Baruch V'ruch Shemo Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam הזן את העולם כולו בטובו בחן בחסד וברחמים, הוא נותן לחם לכל בשר כי לעולם חסדו, ובטובו הגדול תמיד לא חסר לנו ואל יחסר לנו מזון לעולם ועד. בעבור שמו הגדול כי עוזן ופרנס לכל ומיטיב לכל ומכין מזון לכל בריאותיו אשר ברא. ברוך אתה אדוני הזן את הכל. נודה לך אדוני אלוהינו על שהנחלת לאבותינו ואמותינו ארץ חמדה טובה ורחבה, ועל שהוצאתנו אדוני אלוהינו מארץ מצרים ופתיתנו מבית עבדים, ועל בריתך שחתמת בליבנו, ועל תורתך שלמדתנו, ועל חוקיך שהודתנו, ועל חיים חיים וחסד שכוננתנו, ועל אכילת מזון שאתה זן ומפרנס אותנו תמיד בכל יום ובכל עת ובכל שעה. ועל הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ככתוב ואכלת ושבעת וברכת את אדוני אלוהיך על הארץ הטובה שנתן לך. ברוך אתה אדוני על הארץ ועל המזון. רחם אדוני אלוהינו על ישראל עמך וירושלים עירך, ועל ציון משכן כבודך, ועל מלכות בית דוד משיחך, ועל הבית הגדול והקדוש שנקרא שמך עליו. אלוהינו אבינו ראינו זוננו פרנסנו וכלכלנו ואביכנו ואברך לנו, אדוני אלוהינו מרע מכל צרותינו ונעלת צריכנו. אדוני אלוהינו לא לידי מתנת בשר ודם ולא לידי אהבתם, כי אם לידיך מלאה פתוחה, הקדוש אברך ואשר לא נבוש ולא נקלם לעולם ועד. אלוהינו ולאבותינו יעלה ויבוא ויגיע ויראה וירצה וישמע ויחד וזכר זיכרוננו ופקדוננו וזיכרון אבותינו ואמותינו וזיכרון אשר בן דוד עבדך וזיכרון ירושלים מקודשך, זיכרון כל עמך בית ישראל לפניך לפלטה לטובה לחן ולחסד ולרחמים לחיים ולשלום ביורחם המגזות הזה. זוכרנו אדוני אלוהינו בו לטובה ופוקדנו בו לברכה והושיענו בו לחיים טובים. Thank you, Hashem, for bringing us to this beautiful occasion and keeping us well and healthy long enough to celebrate this beautiful moment. Baruch atah Adonai, bonei barachamav Yerushalayim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Ha'elavinu malkeinu, adirenu boreinu, go'aleinu, yotzreinu, kadoshenu, kadosh Yaakov. Ro'einu Rei Yisrael, hamelech hatov ha'meitiv lakol, shebachol yom vayom. hu heitiv umeitiv uyetiv lanu, hugam lenu, yigam lenu la'ad, lechein ulechesed ulerachamim ulerefachat tzala ve'atzlacha, veracha veshua nechama parnasa v'chalkala, verachamim v'chayim v'shalom v'chol tov, umikol tov le'olam al yichasreinu. הרחמנים לא חלנו לעולם ועד, הרחמני יתברך בשמיים ובארץ, הרחמני ישתבח לדור דורים, ויתפרע בנו לעד ולנצח נצחים, ויתעדה בנו לעד ולעולמי עולמים. הרחמני יפרנסנו בכבוד, הרחמני ישמור עלינו מעל צורנו ועל צווארנו ויוליכנו פניות לארצנו, הרחמני ישלח לנו ברכה מרובה בבית הזה, ועל שולחן זה שאכלנו עליו. הרחמן ישלח לנו את אליהו הנביא, הרחמן ישלח לנו את אליהו הנביא זכור לטוב, ויבשר לנו בשורות טובות, ישועות ונחמות. הרחמן יברך אותי ואת כל. May God, who is all merciful, bless my family, all of those that I love and think of at this point. Keep them safe and well, and may we be able to celebrate, please God, Sederim, many of these Seders together, sitting physically around the same table in health and wellness. Kamosh Baruch Avotenu Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah ve'Avotenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yakov ba'kol mikol kol. כן יברך אותנו כולנו יחד בברכה שלמה ונאמר אמן. במרום ילמדו עליהם ועלינו זכות שתהא למשמרת שלום, ונישא ורחמי את אדוני וצדקה מאלוהי שנו ונמצא חן ושכל טוב בעיני אלוהים ואדם. הרחמנו ינחילנו יום שכולו טוב, הרחמנו יזכנו למות המשיח ולחיי העולם הבא, מגדול ישועות מלכו ויעשה חסד למשיחו לדוד ולזרעו עד עולם. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל בני אדם, ואמרו אמן. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו ושלום. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. Leaning to our left. L'chaim. Now that we have eaten, the Talmud gives us words to thank and bless the food that we have eaten. Simply, one line, Brich Rachamana, blessed is the merciful one, Malka de Alma, sovereign of all time and space, Mare de Hai Pita, Lord of this bread meal that we have eaten, in this case, matzah meal that we have eaten. Brich Rachamana, Malka de Alma, Mare de Hai Pita, Brich Rachamana, Malka de Alma, Mare de Hai Pita. Amen.
We have reached the third cup of wine, so everyone fill your glass. With the third glass we recall the third promise. V'ga'alti eitchem bizroa nituya uvishpatim gedolim. And I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. We lean to our left and we all say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen.
Okay, let's do the second bit of Hallel, which comes after the Birkat Hamazon. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim shabachu shabachu kol haumim ki gavar aleinu chasto ve'emet Adonai le'olam hallelujah. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto yomarna Yisrael ki le'olam chasto Yomruna veit Aaron ki le'olam chasto Yomruna yirei Adonai ki le'olam chasto. Min hamitzar karatia anani v'mechavia. Min hamitzar karatia anani v'mechavia. Anani, Anani, V'Merchavia, Anani, 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 V'Merchavia. פיתחו לי שערי צדק אבובם הודיה. פיתחו לי שערי צדק אבובם הודיה. בזה השל אדוני צדיקים יבואו, זה השל אדוני, צדיקים יבואו. עודך כי עניתני, ברוך הבא בשם אדוני, ברכנוכם מבית אדוני אל אדוני, ויער לנו ישרוך בבוטים עד קרנות המזבח, אלי אתה ועודך אלוהי, הרוממך, הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו, כי לעולם חסדו, לעולם חסדו, לעולם חסדו, לעולם חסדו, לעולם חסדו, לעולם חסדו.
Opening the door for Elijah is an ancient custom that we have tracks of it from Haggadot in the 15th century onward, and that comes on toward the end with the fourth glass, when we are toward the end and we fulfill our duties, and this is the time when the person who is doing the Seder is getting up, and we obviously fill the cup for Elijah in the beginning. We progress also filling a cup for Miriam, cup of water, and then we go and we open the door for Elijah, and the whole idea is that Elijah, the prophet, is supposed to kind of bear witness of the covenant between God and his people. This is why he is also the sandak, the godfather, in every circumcision and every brit milah, but in this case he's coming kind of to symbolizes the soon coming redemption. Elijah is the missionary, is the one who announces the redemption to come. So as it says in Nisan nig'alu, in Nisan atidim leigel, in Nisan we had been redeemed, in Nisan we will, the months of Nisan we will be redeemed. This is a sign of redemption and a sign of our yearning and longing. Just before we say next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem, we are opening the door to Elijah and kind of enabling that sense and notion of redemption and salvation and God's love and care for us to come into our houses. Opening the door for Elijah.
We know about Elijah's cup, right? But there's another cup here as well at the Seder, which is filled with water, and that's called Miriam's cup. So Miriam was the big sister who was looking after the little brother Moshe. And Miriam went and was hiding behind the reeds and followed to see where Moshe was going. And when the little basket reached Pharaoh's court, there was Pharaoh's daughter, and she found Moshe and took Moshe out, the little boy, and she knew that it was one of the Hebrew babies who were supposed to be killed, but she wouldn't let that happen. And later on, when the Israelites were going out of Egypt through the water, Miriam was part of the leadership, and at the other side, who was leading the singing and celebration. And in the wilderness, when the Israelites were wandering, there was a well. According to the Midrash, the well was following them. But when Miriam died, it stopped giving the waters. From the beginning of her life to the end, Miriam and the water, Mayim, is much connected. It wasn't Miriam alone. There were the midwives who would not listen to the Pharaoh and would not kill the babies. There was Pharaoh's daughter, there was Yocheved who was hiding Moshe. Because traditional Haggadah don't include these stories, it was due to the feminist movement who put it in and created this ritual. So the Miriam cup is there for us to ask the question, who is this for? What is this for? And it is for all those women who have been traditionally written out of the story. And now we are bringing them in, showing that they are also part of the story that leads us to freedom. A beautiful ritual that you can do at your tables is that each of you sitting around the table can have some water in your cups, and each of you can pour some water into Miriam's cup, symbolizing that you are part of the story for redemption. L'chaim, l'mayim.
This is Eliyahu Hanavi and Miriam Hanivia. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hakilati, Bimhera ve'amenu, Yahabo Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David, Miriam Hanevia, Oz vezimra behata, Miriam tirkoditanu, lehaktil zimrat olam, Miriam tirkoditanu, letaken et ha'olam, bimhera ve'amenu, hitevenu, el mei ha'yeshua, el mei ha'yeshua.
And we now drink the fourth cup of wine, leaning once again to the left. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. L'chaim.
The Omer ritual reminds us that our crops are gifts from God. By counting the 50 days from the second night of Passover through to Shavuot, the ritual also connects our liberation from Egypt, Passover, with the revelation at Sinai when we received the Torah, Shavuot. Traditionally, Passover marked the beginning of the grain harvest. The first crop to ripen was barley. On the second day of Passover, a small measure of the crop, an omer, was brought to the temple as a sacrifice. We count the next 49 days, a period known as the Svirah, literally the counting. On the 50th day, Shavuot, they brought the next crop to ripen, wheat, to the temple as a sacrifice. We can stand and recite the following blessing for the counting of the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kibshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Svirat haomer. Hayom yom echad leomer. Today is the first day of the counting of the Omer.
Nirtzah. Conclusion. Tonight we have joined in an unbroken chain with our ancestors and our ancestors' ancestors and our ancestors' ancestors' ancestors, in commemorating this sacred day, remembering that we were once in bondage and now are liberated. We will be grateful. We will remember those who came before us, and we will lovingly envision those who will come after. We will stand against the enslavement of any living beings, and we will uplift all of our brothers and sisters, and we will know that none of us are free while another suffers in bondage. We will celebrate again next year in the promised land. Chag Sameach.
אחד מי יודע, אחד אני יודע, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שניים מי יודע, שניים אני יודע, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שלושה מי יודע, שלושה אני יודע, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. ארבע מי יודע, ארבע אני יודע, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. חמישה מי יודע, חמישה אני יודע, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שישה מי יודע, שישה אני יודע, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שבעה מי יודע, שבעה אני יודע, שבעה ימי שבתה, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שמונה מי יודע, שמונה אני יודע, שמונה ימי מילה, שבעה ימי שבתה, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. תשעה מי יודע, תשעה אני יודע, תשעה יחי לידה, שמונה ימי מילה, שבעה ימי שבתה, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. עשרה מי יודע, עשרה אני יודע, עשרה דיבריה, תשעה יחי לידה, שמונה ימי מילה, שבעה ימי שבתה, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 11 מי יודע, 11 אני יודע, 11 כוכביה, 10 דיבריה, 9 יחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 12 מי יודע, 12 אני יודע, 12 שבטיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דיבריה, 9 יחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 13 מי יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מידיה, 12 שבטיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דיבריה, 9 יחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
Who knows one? I know one.
One is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows two?
I know two.
Two are the tablets that Moshe brought, and one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows three?
I know three.
Three are the fathers and
two are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows four?
I know four.
Four are the mothers and
three are the fathers.
Two are the tablets that Moshe brought. And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows five?
I know five.
Five are the books of the Torah, and
four are the mothers.
Three are the fathers, and
two are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows six?
I know six.
Six are the books of the Mishnah, and
five are the books of the Torah.
And four are the mothers, and
three are the fathers.
Two are the tablets that Moshe brought. And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows seven?
I know seven.
Seven are the days of the week.
And six are the books of the Mishnah.
And five are the books of the Torah. And
four are the mothers.
And three are the fathers. And
two are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows eight?
I know eight.
Eight are the days of the bris.
And seven are the days of the week.
And six are the books of the Mishnah. And
five are the books of the Torah.
And four are the mothers. And
three are the fathers.
Two are the tablets that Moshe brought. And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows nine?
I know nine.
Nine are the months before a baby's born. And
eight are the days for a bris.
And seven are the days of the week.
And six are the books of the Mishnah.
And five are the books of the Torah. And
four are the mothers.
Three are the fathers. And
two are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows 10?
I know 10.
10 are the 10 commandments. And
9 are the months before a baby's born.
And 8 are the days of the bris.
And 7 are the days of the week.
And 6 are the books of the Mishnah. And
5 are the books of the Torah.
And 4 are the mothers. And
3 are the fathers.
2 are the tablets that Moshe brought. And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows 11?
I know 11.
11 are the stars in Joseph's dreams. And
10 are the 10 commandments.
And 10 are the 9 are the month before a baby is born. And
8 are the days till the bris.
And 7 are the days of the week.
And 6 are the books of the Mishnah.
And 5 are the books of the Torah. And
4 are the mothers.
3 are the fathers. And
2 are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows 12?
I know 12.
12 are the tribes of Israel.
And 11 are the stars in Joseph's dream.
And 10 are the 10 commandments. And
9 are the months till a baby's born.
And 8 are the days of the bris.
And 7 are the days of the week.
And 6 are the books of the Mishnah. And
5 are the books of the Torah.
And 4 are the mothers. And
3 are the fathers.
2 are the tablets that Moshe brought. And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the ooh, ah, baby, ooh, ah, baby. Who knows 13?
I know 13.
13 are the attributes of God. And
12 are the tribes of Israel.
And 11 are the stars in Joseph's dreams. And
10 are the 10 commandments.
And 9 are the months before a baby is born. And
8 are the days till the bris.
And 7 are the days of the week. And
6 are the books of the Mishnah.
5 are the books of the Torah. And
4 are the mothers.
3 are the fathers. And
2 are the tablets that Moshe brought.
And one is our God, one is our God, one is our God. In the heavens and the earth.
Sabanabba Petrezuzay, Chagadia, 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 Chagadia. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Gaja, Hagaja, 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 Ta'ata Leshunra, Tanashach Legadya. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Gaja, Hagaja, Hagaja, Hagaja. Va'ata lechalba, Tanashach leshunra, Tanashach legadya, Teach legadya. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Gaja, Hagaja, 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 Ta'ata Hagaja, 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 Ta'ata lechutra, Tehika lechalba, Tanashach leshonra, Teachla legadya. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja. And so you continue all the way through each of the characters in Hagaja, building up each time and adding the animal noises, etc. And I'm now going to just run through all of them at the very end. So this is when you've come to the end of Hagaja. You have built up to the following. Va'ata Kadosh Baruch Hu, V'shachat lemalach hamavet, T'shachat leshochet, T'shachat letorah, T'shachat lemaya, T'hika kiv t'chava lenorah, T'saraf lechudra, T'hika lekalba, T'nashach leshunra, T'achla legadya. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja. Tizabana Bapitre Suze, Hagaja, 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 Hagaja.
Hi everyone! I'm so excited. Passover is almost here, so I wanted to share one of my favorite songs. It's called Pharaoh, Pharaoh. It has some dance moves, so if you want to dance along at home, you can. It looks like this. We go, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, whoa, baby, let my people go. Huh. Yeah, 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 I said a Pharaoh, Pharaoh, whoa, baby, let my people go. Huh. Yeah, 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 yeah. So those are our dance moves, and if you want to sing along, you can.